Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. Before we begin with Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, I know that many of you watching have felt a sense of being ungrounded, unhinged, or out of balance in these times. I know. I've felt this way too. Kris's teachings have similarities to popular ideas such as the law of attraction and the secret. The difference is that Kris's knowledge goes even deeper into reality creation and helps resolve many of the problems identified with the law of attraction. The information he shares helps restore grounding and that sense of balance that many of us have lost in these times. If you're ready for the law of attraction and secret 2.0 and want to be a part of this fantastic community, then hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and press the bell icon so that you get notified when Kris releases cool, new metaphysical content. Kris also offers life-changing online seminars, private sessions, and mentoring sessions, which are all linked in the description below. Glad you're here with us, and let's jump into it. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And today, before we get started, Serge and I are just going to chat a little bit. I know we are on to episode 23, so we've been doing this for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. Time flies.
Yeah. How are you doing today, Serge?
I'm very good, thank you very much. Just riffing off what you just said about life from the inside out. It's quite interesting when you start thinking about your life is actually an inside job. Mm-hmm. And when you start really understanding the process, it's almost shocking that a person has much more influence on their lives than most of us have ever been led to believe. And I know Kris has asked a few people this recently. I think maybe in private sessions or discussions like that. Mm-hmm. But what he's asked is, who is the most influential person in your life? Somebody will say, oh, my mother, my father, my uncle, my teacher, my professor, whatever. And he just lets them go for a few minutes and he says, actually, no. He said, the most influential person in your life is you, because you talk to yourself all the time. Sometimes you may use the voice of a parent or a sibling or somebody else, but you talk to yourself and your mind is listening all the time. So it's basically following your directions. So you are the most influential person in your life. And it's quite something to take into account.
Yeah, he introduced it on the show in episode 21 here.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe not the
first
time.
it.
Maybe not the first. Maybe not the first or the only mention of it. But if anybody's interested, Kris goes into that in that episode. And for me, I was doing an interesting little exercise. I went for a few hour walk in the park, and what was coming for me is our thoughts, or being able to follow our own thoughts, was really important in that process. And what I found myself doing is I was investing or paying attention to a particular thought that maybe wasn't going to move me in the direction I wanted, and was playing a little game where it felt heavy. I'd imagine the thought as like a bowling ball in a bag, and being like, okay, I'm going to leave that one right there, or this one there. And so, beginning to understand some of those things comes from knowing that that I'm creating those thoughts and generating them, and not somebody else. They may be have associations or relations with those folks, but ultimately I'm the one investing in them at this moment.
And I think it's worth considering just how we manage our lives. And whether, I think, what comes to my mind is whether we think we're managing our lives poorly or well, we are the ones that are doing that. It's not an outside agency. you know. So it's just a lot of food for thought. And this is kind of what I like also, having worked with Kris for so long, is the way he leaves information. You really have to think. He never pablum feeds anyone. And he's mentioned a long time ago he will never do that. He would prefer to drop enough hints so that you start putting the pieces together, and then you have your own aha moment. Oh, now I get it, you know?
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about that today. You know, I think there's some moments it's like, oh, does he know something? And it's like, maybe he does, and just kind of leaves it for us to figure out. So, but then when you do that, I think from on our end, you learn it. You really know. You kind of internalize it, and then it becomes part of your own internal process, and then it's there. It's powerful.
Yep. And on that note, why don't we just bring him in?
All right, let's do it.
Now we trust that you are comfortable.
Oh, very comfortable. Welcome to the show, Kris.
Indeed, and we trust that you are not only comfortable, but that you are considering all of the information that we share. And with that, we do thank you for your consideration. The main point is that you consider the possibilities that are offered to you through this kind of an information exchange. As Joseph has explained, we presented many, many years ago that our particular preference is not to feed anyone pablum, but rather leave trails, crumbs of knowledge and wisdom in such a manner that you find the treasure at the end of the trail. And that treasure comes in the form of illumination, in the form of an exclamation, a sudden realization of the impact of the words and the manner in which they are shared and the information itself, and how it percolates through the different layers of your understanding to reach from the intellectual right down to the most fundamental platform of emotional and feeling states, which is where you create in conjunction with your imagination. And when literally the light bulb goes on, you are the one that has understood the principles that are shared, even though they are shared in the form of a lovely verbal exchange. But there is also so much more going on behind the scenes. Because even though the words reach your intellect and ego and logical and rational mind in the manner we work them, at the same time, they are purposefully interwoven so as to provide a kind of lifeline to the deepest parts of self-knowledge within you, so that this knowledge can realize that it is being called forth. It is called to come to the surface of your awareness, so that you can not only cogitate it, but also have that experience as best as possible in the moment the light bulb goes on. But it does not end there, because there are all sorts of threads interwoven in the process itself. The act of turning on the light bulb, the moment of recognition, brings forth more of the same. And that is where the process is at its most interesting and valuable, because you already have a deep font of knowledge and wisdom. You are born with it. It is innate to your nature. It is innate to you. What occurs as you grow up is that you supplant that inherent wisdom with all of the information that comes from the senses, that comes from the family environment, and the society, and the culture, and the civilization. Sometimes that second-hand knowledge buries the first-hand, your knowledge of birth. And it buries it, but it is never effaced. Sometimes the seed recognizes and begins to grow its way to the surface, just like any seedling will grow its way to the top of the soil and break free. And as we suggested some sessions ago, often it may take years for you to recognize, for instance, that you have done so many things in life, accomplished so many other things, and yet there is still a core within you that resounds with an emptiness. There is not this kind of sense of fulfillment that you had expected from your particular life. So you begin to quest. You go on a quest. If you are so inclined, you begin to quest for the actual meaning of life, for the actual reasons for you to be here. Why are you here? What are you meant to do? Is this all there is to life? You are born, you study, you grow up, you work, you pay bills, and you die. Is that all there is to life? So these questions can bring interesting answers and insights. When you begin to recognize that there is so much more to life than what you were told you were supposed to be happy with, and you recognize, no, I am still not happy, but I recognize that there is a call towards a different kind of happiness that comes from within. And often the individual responds to the call. So this type of sharing in that way is to continue the process of that call, so that you can recognize that, in fact, there is more to your life than you might ever have surmised. And in that vein, since we have for a few evenings now been speaking about the imagination, let us continue, but in a different way, in a different direction. Your imagination is not only to help you build sand castles on the beach, or to draw with crayons, or to become a Picasso. Your imagination, as a species, has been extremely useful in helping you adapt to the kind of environment different variable humanoid species, as they have evolved through your process of evolution, as you understand it. Your ancestors, in that way, also made use of imagination. Imagination is not just and only something that your current culture makes use of. For example, the imagination was used in a different way to help your ancestors find food, to find shelter, to find plants that heal, as well as to recognize plants that may not heal. It has been speculated that so many of your ancestors might have died eating berries that were in actuality poisonous. And other members of the tribe recognizing, oh, Uncle Grunt Grunt died eating those berries, so let us not eat those berries. Now, we do not know if you have an Uncle Grunt Grunt, but you understand the point. It might have been a little bit different. Your ancestors were not as dumb as a bag of doorknobs. Your ancestors had keen senses as well. In fact, probably keener than your own, aligned with their environment. They were able to observe much more accurately and acutely than your presentation of human beings. So they would not only observe how animals fed themselves, especially herbivores, because that was also part of their diet. Herbs, plants, berries, fruits, and so on. They not only observed which animals might have survived eating those kinds of fruits and berries, but they also had still a much closer link to Dreamtime, very much in line with the Australian Aboriginal people. So they ventured into Dreamtime, and Carl Jung also documented primitive tribes who still used similar Dreamtime experimentations to find and forage for food, especially animals. But that also included edible fruits and berries. What they would do is request a dream to help them find where they could be the next day, so that perhaps with a bow and arrow or some other instrument, find, hunt, and kill their prey so that the tribe could eat. So in the dream, they would be shown that you can be here at this time. And of course, they did not have Gucci watches or smart watches. They depended on the sun. And at a particular time of day or period of day, when the sun was aligned in a specific way, they would be waiting, and lo and behold, the prey, whether it was a rabbit or a deer, would show up because they had predicated it in the dream state. So they relied on that kind of an exchange with their natural world. They had a much nicer and friendlier relationship with their natural world. They did not try to conquer and eliminate their natural world. They respected and became stewards of that world because it was their livelihood. It provided them with shelter and food and water. So the imagination and use thereof goes back to the very beginnings of your ancestors. But there is more. As the gentleman says, but wait, there is more. There are areas of the imagination that are deeply linked with Dreamtime, and this is what these ancestral people used and did. They used that particular link within the subconscious that links the imagination with Dreamtime. And they were able to formulate a particular kind of environment that was best suited for their introduction into that environment. So they would also use that kind of an ability to locate very specific areas that were suitable for their protection, for their safety, for their livelihood. And they would depend on that link in an incredible, how do we say, the way they depended on it was extremely intimate. They had and respected this link with the natural environment. But there is more. If you go back far enough in your version of linear time and space, these people, these beings that dared to venture into a humanoid form would also create the environment within which they would then don the suit of the body within which to function within that kind of a new environment, straight out of Dreamtime. Much in the same way that you have to wear a scuba diving or deep sea diving outfit if you want to go into the depths of the ocean. Because by yourself, you would only survive for a few moments. But with these kinds of suits and that kind of equipment, you can go for a much longer period of time. So the body, as you understand it, became the equipment with which these dream walkers, as Uncle Seth is wont to refer to them, to enable them to function for a period of time into this newly formed environment, which happens to be an extension of Dreamtime. You would consider it different because you think you are awake and you have a waking experience, even though for all intents and purposes, you are just in another kind of a dream, and you have a different kind of a dream body that you call a body of flesh and bone. But it too is composed of the elements of consciousness. And you are the consciousness that then animates that piece of living equipment. Over long periods of time, your species has become overly identified with the body. Even though they create it, they have come to believe that this is what they are. Imagine for a moment that you put on a glove, and then you say, "This is now my hand." And the glove thinks it is the hand, though it is not. You can remove it at any time. So all of these processes require an extensive and powerful use of the imagination, feelings, and emotions. So your species has been utilizing it literally forever, because imagination, feeling, and emotions are not limited to having a physical form. They are the necessary tools, mechanisms, and technologies that you always have with you, whether you are embodied or not. So the nature of your resources is not dependent upon time and space as it is usually understood. In fact, the very opposite occurs. The nature of time and space are dependent upon your species' individual and collective use of emotions, feelings, and imagination. This is what your scientists, your physicists, your astrophysicists, your quantum scientists are looking for. Consciousness. But they think they can find it inside the body. They think they might be able to find it in a rock or a leaf or your brain. They will never find it there. They will find the evidence of it. Literally the results of your consciousness with all of the beautiful accoutrements of consciousness, which includes imagination, feeling, emotions. But they will not find any of those, no matter how they dissect any kind of life form. So this leaves your scientists with an interesting conundrum. Would a or some scientists be so bold and brazen as to venture into that kind of a domain? Literally into the domain of metaphysics? Or would they just prefer to stay where they are, always looking for the origin of the origin of the origin, the smallest of the smallest of the smallest, particles, atoms, quanta, whatever you want to call it. And in that particular direction, they will always be hunting for the origin. They always will be hunting for the smallest and never truly find what they are looking for. Because what they are ultimately looking for, without sometimes admitting to it, is consciousness. Form is the result of consciousness. Form does not create consciousness. So it is an interesting quantum conundrum that they are on.
Well, and it's kind of funny too, Kris, because it's right in front of them too. In a way, I'm like, but I also understand the mindset that from that mindset it doesn't seem obvious. And the other thing I wanted to say is that, at least from my perspective of what I'm learning, is you find it from. I think it's tied a little bit to the title of the series, Life from the Inside Out. You're going to find that consciousness or that spark by looking within your own being.
Indeed. And it would require that kind of a bold and brazen explorer of consciousness. That kind of an explorer would need to turn their sight inwardly into the mind, as opposed to only through the senses. This does not invalidate the senses. They are wonderful creatures in their own way, and they are all little bits of liars, in a manner of speaking, because they only project a certain spectrum of reality. Your eyes have cones and rods that only give you a certain level of insight into the spectrum of light. Even though it might be in the millions, it is still not the full range. There are creatures in your world that have much better, superior eyesight than you do. There are other creatures that have superior hearing, superior sense of smell, superior sense of taste, even touch. So this would certainly be a challenge for the scientific community, and at the same time, if they dared venture there, it would open up realities in the very way that they are trying to find. But right now, they are more or less stuck between a quanta and a hard rock. Without realizing that the rock itself is made of quanta, units of consciousness. Please feel free to continue, or would you prefer that this be a break?
Well, I do think it's break time, and but we'll pose one question, and maybe we could even talk after the break. I was wondering if, say we have like a dream image, or say we're doing like a guided imagery, or an example is the other day, I'm writing a novel, and I saw the chapter as a particular type of mental image, and as you were talking about light, I was wondering if an image like that might be a type of light that we don't register with our eyes, that we register with our mind, and maybe to explore that.
We might answer that now. So any kind of form that you perceive, whether through the senses, which would mean the objective external physical reality, or any kind of form that shows up in your mind's eye, is still made up of units of consciousness, quantas, as your scientists refer to them. And you create that. So you have a certain attachment and investment to them. And they are not you, but they are and part of you as well. Because your own energy is utilized to create that form in your mind's eye. So there is still a certain investment and meaningfulness to it. Otherwise, you would not bring it up onto the screen of your mind. So it contains specific meaning to you. It is symbolic, just like everything else in your external world is all symbolic for you. Otherwise, you would not have it. And yes, different spectrums of light are available in different ways, physically or non-physically. So here we might even continue after the break, if you so desire, just request it. And now we will take that little break.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Kris. Thanks for watching, and if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.